We know very well that where NATO gets involved, those are terrorists. We know very well where the US says we are going in to install peace. That place will never know peace as long as America has visited that place.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Well,
because, you know, they've tried to assassinate him like 13 times already.
Yes, that's mostly the French. CIA as well. I think because of the outpouring of love and support that he got on April 30th, keep in mind, no other Pan-Africanist, even the great ones, have had that type of a public demonstration in their support before Ibrahim Traoré. And that's so I think that demonstration 4 days ago really, really, really is going to make Donald Trump and the other allied forces think twice about what they do and how they come at Burkina Faso, which means they're going to have to use somebody within the inner circle. And we are Africa. If Mandela doesn't get released, when he got released, I believe black people would have took South Africa back. And that's why a lot of South Africans don't see Mandela as a hero. They see him as a distraction from the liberation agenda that was already in play.
Wow.
I want to say that I'm very proud and very thankful to all the Africans around the diaspora on the continent, the entire Pan-African universe. 4 days ago, April the 30th, there was a massive global demonstration in support of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. You know, hands off of Burkina Faso, hands off the Sahel Alliance. And from Jamaica to Johannesburg to London to New York, all over the world, Central and South America, brothers and sisters, Canada, they stood in solidarity with our brother Ibrahim Traoré, who I would say is the top Pan-Africanist in the world and the most relevant African leader that we've had in about a half of a century. You know, and the fact that he's under, you know, the age of 60 speaks volumes, not to, you know, besmirch at all the character of our elders, but as you know, Bobby David, the older you get, the more comfortable you get, the less revolutionary you are.
That's right.
And so many of our leaders on the African continent are over the age of 60, and those who are under the age of 50 tend to be egotists, narcissists who only took over the country to serve a selfish agenda. Ibrahim Traoré is much younger than 50, and he's clearly leading the country in the direction of the people's best interest. And what happened a few days ago, Bobby David, was the AFRICOM commander, a House Negro appointed by President Trump by the name of Michael Langley. He made some comments about Burkina Faso and Captain Ibrahim, where he basically said that Captain Ibrahim led a coup, and America shouldn't have any problem with coups because they have financed most of the coups in Africa through the CIA. But anyhow, they said he led a coup and has taken over the gold reserve of Burkina Faso, not for the interests of his people, but for his own selfish aggrandizement. And we know that's not true, Bobby David, because that brother wears the same, you know, type of clothing every day. He eats the same food. He did not take an increase in pay. He lives very modestly. He is very much the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara before him. And for Michael Langley, the AFRICOM general, to point him out and accuse him unfairly and dishonestly of expropriating the resources of his country, you know, that clearly shows you that the CIA has him targeted. He's targeted.
I know that
the purpose of the protest.
I know that Vladimir Putin from Russia says that everybody need to keep their hands off of him, you know, because they are an independent sovereign state, and they can't talk about coming there and arresting him for whatever reason, you know. And he says that Russia is not, you know, extorting them or exploiting them. They just friends with them because they are friends in trade.
Absolutely. And see, historically what America has done, because they did it to Thomas Sankara, they did it to Patrice Lumumba, they try to brand you a communist for having a relationship with a communist country. But America has relationships with Saudi Arabia. Are you Islamicist? No, you're not. So why can't you have a relationship with a country who has a different political ideology than your own and not be branded as a follower or flunky of that particular regime? The bottom line is America wants the resources of Burkina Faso. Now that they have kicked France out, you know, France and America are allies. America wants those resources. If France can't get them, America wants them, and America and France are going to work together to try to recolonize Burkina Faso. And to that end, comments were made, I think it was by the Prime Minister of France, basically saying the same thing. And he said that we are not going to give up on our African colonies. We are going to stay there and help them become what they need to be. That was a code word, Bobby, that we are not going to accept Burkina Faso's demand that we leave. Although they're gone, we're going to try to come back in. We're going to try to overthrow him, and we're going to try to put the white supremacist puppet regime back in place. That's what they're saying.
Wow.
So Burkina Faso has to look out for France and America working together to try to recolonize Africa, because here's the thing, Father David. Most of Africa is under the age of 30. Most of Africa. In fact, I think most of Black America is under the age of 32. And that is a concern for the white power structure of this planet, particularly UK, France, Germany, Britain, and Belgium, because if Ibrahim Traoré and those other two brothers up there, President Goita of Mali and President Chiani of Niger, if that Sahel alliance is effective in influencing and building leaders, strong, strong, brothers who are focused on the best interests of their people, who are not self-serving, that can lead to a continental-wide African liberation struggle, which is what Africa has always needed. Africa never had a continental-wide liberation struggle. They had regional struggles. As you know, Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he allowed a revolutionary army, liberation armies, to come and train in Ghana when he became president, which is one of the reasons they overthrew him. But we've never had a continental-wide revolution, and we've never had a global Pan-Africanist revolution. But I just say all that to say, Baba David, I'm happy for the brothers and sisters who stood up across the world. Many of them are not Pan-Africanists. They have not really studied the philosophy and the greatness of Pan-African philosophy, but they still understood that we were African. And at a time that we have organizations in this country who are trying to influence our young people not to identify as African, who are trying to tell them that they are pretendians or they are Asiatic or they are indigenous to America and all these other lies. It just felt really, really good to see them stand up and recognize that they were African, and it just lets us know that the red, black, and green flag is still in full effect.
I know that they having a lot of propaganda and publicity about Ibrahim, and it's like I don't understand. I understand what they're trying to oversaturate him so that people will think that he is a negative when actually he's a positive. Hey, Patrick, how you doing? I see you over there.
I'm doing good.
Good. And I was really insulted when France had the nerve to say that Burkina Faso and Africa should be grateful to France.
It's unfortunate. That is such an unfortunate statement that the president made to the leader and some leaders of Africa, because France pretty much lives on the resources of African countries. They do. And with Ibrahim Traoré, really taking over as he is doing, and with the other two, the Sahel, movement, they are afraid. They're pretty much afraid that things are going to slip off their hands, and they're going to become one of the poorest countries in Europe very, very soon. And that is going to work in their interest. So all those statements, we are far, far, far past the colonial time when we give you everything. Not anymore. It's never going to happen. Not even today.
I know France is talking about Burkina Faso is one of the poorest nations. Well, the leader said, well, if we're so poor, why y'all don't want to get out? Why y'all want to just leave us alone?
Well, and why are we so poor? Because of exploitation.
Yes.
Your colonization. And keep in mind, when many of the African countries received independence, and you have to put independence in quotes, but when they received independence, when on their way out the door, France, Belgium, on their way out the UK, on their way out the door, the Dutch, they sabotaged the infrastructure of those countries to make sure that even after all that exploitation, we're going to make sure that you can't even use the infrastructure we built just to benefit ourselves. So they sabotaged the water sources, they sabotaged the railways, they sabotaged the ships, they sabotaged the electricity systems. They made it so you had to start from scratch without nothing, not to mention the neo-colonialist demands that they made. They continued to print the money for most of their African colonies. They continued to handpick the leadership. They continued to, taint the democracy. Like, they have never given their former colonies an opportunity to grow on their own. That's why they assassinated Patrice Lumumba. He said, we don't need you. We know how to do this ourselves. But because he didn't want to continue to be a puppet, same thing with Amilcar Cabral, same thing with Thomas Sankara, the overthrow of Osajifo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They tried to do the same thing with Sekou Touré when they invaded his country, but he was able to successfully repel it. They did it with Walter Rodney. They did it with Maurice Bishop down in the Caribbean. This is what they do. You're going to do it the way we're going to do it, or we're going to unleash a barrage of propaganda that's going to have your own people thinking you're incompetent if they don't know their history. And that's why we have to know our political history, the ancient history of Africa. That's also important to learn. But what I find as I travel around and speak to students, even in college, they don't know the political history of African people. And specifically what I mean by that is I'm looking at 1950 until now. Do you know what has happened for African people and to African people everywhere in the world, wherever they are, from 1950 until now? And extending beyond that, I would say you should know the complete political history of African people from 1900 until now. A lot of our young people know everything about Egypt. They know everything about the pyramids. They know everything about the ancient kingdoms, but they don't know a damn thing about how we got to be where we are now. And if you don't understand how we got to be where we are now politically, you will automatically fall victim to the propaganda. A historically conscious person can never have propaganda used against them.
That's true. That is very true. Africans don't know their own history. I think African Americans know African history much better than Africans themselves do. If you ask a Ghanaian some basic Ghanaian history right now, they wouldn't be able to tell you, but they consume everything Europe, they consume everything America, Canada, and France, and they accept those things more than their own history. So that's one of the problems that we have in Africa, that we rarely listen to them.
Patrick, what do you think creates that cultural deficiency in Africa?
It's the propaganda. The propaganda. Because we have actually, even as we detest our own cultures. Our own cultures, we detest them versus the European culture. So if we have this tribal conflict between us, even within the tribes, there are conflicts within us. So it is easy to play that game for us, that psychological warfare for we Africans. Very, very easy to do that with a token of cash, and then an African person is against the fellow African person.
Wow.
And we love everything European. When you go to Ghana right now, they're doing a lot of stuff that you'd be like, how are these people doing this? What we were not used to doing stuff like that. But
in this age of information, it would seem like more people are reading now and reading more about the history that is trying to be minimized, but they could read on their own. All information is available today.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing, too. It's not just about the information. It's about the indoctrination. And what we mean by that is the repeated exposure and the repeated enforcing of the information so that it becomes a part of one's unconscious, and therefore it unconsciously affects the way you think, feel, and behave. In other words, we have to push the information into the working unconscious. So, in other words, if I just give you a book and you read it, now a lot of people will be affected by reading a book one time. But if you're trying to indoctrinate the people, you want to condition the people, that requires a socialization system. And so you got to have a socialization system. That a school system can be a socialization system, but it tends not to be in our communities because our children are not taught who they are, and they're not taught who they are by people who are African themselves. So if you take the school district of Philadelphia, you have the 1-credit African-American history course that they do here. I think they get it in the 10th grade. But it's only 1 credit. So the other 11 years in civics and history class, you're taught the lives of America, the greatness of America, the greatness of the people who enslaved your ancestors. And then we're going to give you one class in the 10th grade after you've already been indoctrinated, and that class is likely to be taught by somebody who doesn't even look like you or care about you. So what good is it going to do? So the information is only as good as the person teaching it, and the person teaching it, no matter how good of a teacher they are, will only be as effective as the system that supports them. You got to have a system where the kids are taught who they are every day. Look at China. In the Chinese schools, those children are taught who they are every day. It is a part of every lesson. It is a part of every text. They are taught to be proud to be Chinese. And so what you see now with Donald Trump and the executive order he signed to make it illegal to teach the true history of America, he's trying to do the same thing. He wants to reinforce the minds of white kids to believe that they are superior, that they basically save black people. He doesn't want the truth of America to be told, because if you teach the truth of America to America's children, it'll be hard to be proud of something like that. So what he's going to do is he's going to distort the truth by keeping it out of the books. But again, as we had this conversation last time, black people can teach their own children their own history. We don't need white people to do it. But what is the one thing that slavery and colonization did to us as a people? It made us completely indifferent to controlling the dynamics and direction of our community. We do not care about controlling the dynamics or the direction of our community. In other words, black people are not interested in power. We're the only people in this country who are not interested in power. We don't want to dominate anything. We don't want to control anything. We don't want to create our own systems. We just want to subsist off the benevolence and goodwill of whites and non-blacks. And so that that until we liberate African consciousness, which is what we're talking about, but again, you got to socialize, because we all know people. I know people. You know people. We all know people who know African history, but they are still sellouts. I can name at least 10 people who know African history well, and they still work against the interests of African people. So it's not enough to just know it. It has to be put into your spirit. It has to be internalized. It has to be ritualized. And that's why you got to have a socialization system.
It has to be believed. But I believe it's time for us to go to a commercial break. And we will come back. We will continue the conversation here in the studios of WURD with Dr. Umar, Ifatunde Johnson, Patrick, and Jadu, calling them, zooming in from an undisclosed location. And I'm David Barnes, photo man for you too. We'll be right back. And we're back live here in the studios of 96.1 FM, 900 AM, streaming live worldwide at WURDradio.com. On the phone line with us is Dr. Umar Ifatunde Johnson and Patrick and Jadu. And we have so many things to talk about today. We spent the first quarter talking about Burkina Faso and the challenges that they have there. Before we move to another segment, Doctor, so what do you think is going to happen? The brother's getting so much promotion, publicity right now. I think they're trying to oversaturate him. So what do you think is going to happen? Well, because, they tried to assassinate him like 13 times already.
Yes, that's mostly the French. CIA as well. I think because of the outpouring of love and support that he got on April 30th, keep in mind, no other Pan-Africanist, even the great ones, have had that type of a public demonstration in their support before Ibrahim Traoré. And that's because there was no social media to get the word out in the states of Nkrumah or Lumumba, or Cabral. We didn't have social media then, so they could not coordinate it as well as the public demonstration was coordinated in support of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. So I personally think that the power structure is going to back up, and they're going to re-engineer. They're going to rethink this. They're not going to stop. But, so, he has to be careful, and I'm sure he will. And we have to stay adamant that we're not going to tolerate it. But what they cannot afford is for him to be overthrown, God forbid, and then that sets off a reaction in Africa and a reaction amongst African people in the diaspora that destabilizes America, Belgium, France, and the UK's other foreign agendas and interests that they have around the world. In other words, the one thing that's given them the most fear, that if we do this and it is exposed that we did this, then this could affect other colonization efforts that we have in process in South America, Central America, the Caribbean, every country's in Africa. So this could start a domino effect that could undermine their influence in Africa and amongst black people around the world. So they have to think this one through, because there's more African people in the world, way more African people in the world than Caucasians. Now, although they may have the firepower, we have the numbers. And I'm sure they don't want a direct conflict on that level with blacks, because remember, the goal is to get the resources of Africa. So you ain't dropping no atomic bombs because you'll destroy the resources that you need. So the benefit of African soil is that the colonizer doesn't want to go into a true nuclear war situation, because that would basically, nullify his whole purpose for being over there anyway, which is the resources. So I think that demonstration 4 days ago really, really, really is going to make Donald Trump and the other allied forces think twice about what they do and how they come at Burkina Faso, which means they're going to have to use somebody within the inner circle. And we all know those stories. Malcolm X birthday, coming up, Dr. King. We know every great leader we had, Marcus Garvey. They was all set up side. And so he's going to have to be really, 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 really careful about the Judas factor.
That's right. That's right. Well, when you talked about support, Nelson Mandela had a global support, but did that really make a lot of difference for South Africa?
Well, in a way it did, because remember, South Africa began to struggle because of the sanctions that was put on her by countries around the world. So that definitely played a role in Nelson Mandela's release. Now, I think that the apartheid regime was going to release him anyway, because they needed somebody who could stop the South African youth from rebelling in the streets. Because if Nelson Mandela doesn't get out of prison, and this is a big reason why a lot of our South African brothers and sisters don't really see him as a complete hero, because he really stopped the military, the black boots on the ground military, the Umkhonto Sizwe, the spear of the nation. He really stopped the military, the People's Army, from taking back South Africa. If Mandela doesn't get released, when he got released, I believe black people would have took South Africa back. And that's why a lot of South Africans don't see Mandela as a hero. They see him as a distraction from the liberation agenda that was already in play.
Wow.